please welcome Kirsty.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Ignite Financial and the Atherton and Malanda Chamber of Commerce for inviting me up. I do live in Cairns, but I really feel like the Tablelands is becoming part of my community as well. I'm getting to know more and more of you, so it's wonderful to be here today and looking forward to meeting people I haven't met before. So perhaps no other introduction needed, but I'm Kirsty Nancarrow, and I have been to hell and back. My journey to this moment started when I was 9 years old. I used to write poetry, I used to write short stories. My grandfather was my inspiration and still is. And when I was 9 years old, he told me that I look like Jana Wendt. Does anyone remember Jana Wendt? Yeah. So she was a presenter for a current affair at that point, and a highly regarded journalist, and I thought, that's it. I'm going to become a journalist. So it kind of stuck with me from that moment. So I applied myself really hard to my studies and directed all of my energy towards that goal of becoming a journalist. I became the dux of my primary and high school in Western Sydney, not really known for its academic excellence. I was very driven, mostly by my father, Ray, who was a school teacher who drummed into me that success in his eyes meant being the best. So I was always trying my hardest on the tennis court, at school, and later at work. So when I finished school, I got a good score. I scored in the top 4% of New South Wales, which gave me entry into a sought-after journalism degree. But did I go and do that? No, I was busting to be a journalist. So I went and worked on my local newspaper, the Blacktown Guardian. I remember having an interesting question after doing my job interview from the Mail newspaper editor. He rang me up and he said, before I offer you the job, I just have a question for you. And I'm like, what's this going to be? And he said, are you 18? And I thought, what a strange question. And I felt a bit creepy. And I said, yes, why? And he said, because we go to the pub every lunchtime and talk shop with the other Mail journalists and photographers from the other paper, and we play snooker. I'm like, okay, well, yes, I'm 18, and so I joined the boys' club on my local newspaper. And it was a great job, even though I only earned $200 a week, plus $20 for having a car, because I was the only one that had a car, so that also made me the newspaper photographer as well. I'd actually earned more when I was waitressing at Sizzler, but anyway, that's another story. I was so stoked that I was getting my first job as a journalist. I thought I hit the jackpot when I almost doubled my wage a year and a half later to go and work for the New South Wales Education Minister as a media officer. Some might think that was a little early to step out of my journalism career, but it was actually a good move. I learned so much about politics and the other side, and actually how journalists work from the other side. But I was really keen to fulfil my goal to work for the ABC, so I was spending my weekends doing work experience for Channel 9 and also on community radio alongside a young and perhaps even more ambitious and driven Paul Murray, who you might also know these days. It was hard getting into the ABC, so I eventually went back to the degree. I did a master's at Wollongong University, and when I was overlooked for an ABC cadetship for the third time, I decided I had to go regional. I'd grown up in Sydney, hadn't lived anywhere else, but I thought, I'm ready. I applied for jobs in Port Pirie, Port Augusta, Karratha, and Alice Springs. And to be honest, I think sending my Jana Wendt looking black and white portrait with my application probably helped with getting my job in Alice Springs, because in those days, most newsrooms were run by men. I had done 300 hours of work experience for the ABC while I was doing my degree at the 7:30 report and also for ABC in Wollongong. So I felt ready. And I went out to Alice Springs, and this time I halved my wage for the privilege of working for the national broadcaster, going to a place in the middle of the country where I knew no one. But I thought, this is good. I'll prove myself. In the first 12 months, they'll see that I'm worth more money. No. Despite working 12-hour days for several months, because they didn't replace 2 other journalists that left for a few months, doing TV, radio and online, I was told by the male Northern Territory editor, who had never met me and never really seen my work, during my performance review on the telephone, that I wasn't exceptional, that Jeff Thompson was exceptional, somebody else who had been through the Bureau and was doing wonderful things. And he also said, and by the way, stop working the 12 hours a day because you're accruing too much time off in lieu. Not that we ever got to take that. So that kind of got me thinking, it's time to work smarter, not harder. And thankfully these days there are more women running newsrooms. I really loved my time in Alice Springs. It was such a great community, and this community really reminds me of it. It was a sense of adventure. I rode a camel in the Camel Cup for a news story. I went to Harts Range races and rode a potty calf in the rodeo. I remember driving back 250 k's on a dirt road to do another job on a Sunday with a bruise about the size of my entire butt cheek. But it was really good. But I also covered lots of major national events, which I probably wouldn't have had a chance to do if I'd stayed in a city. So things like the disappearance of British backpacker Peter Falconio, the Queen's visit, the landing of the Olympic torch at Uluru, and the federal intervention in the Northern Territory. So it had its time, been there for 3 years, really wanted to get ahead in the ABC, had to actually leave my job and go and work as a casual in Sydney for the chance to work for AM, PM and The World Today, which I did for a while, but then I thought, I really want to go overseas and try that out. Well, that was a rude shock. I was persona non grata in terms of my career over there. So I'd gone from the top of my career at the ABC over there, and I didn't actually work as a foreign correspondent. I would have loved to, but I ended up working in PR and as a maitre d' of a 5-star Indian restaurant in Chelsea, frequented by celebrities like Bryan Adams and Rowan Atkinson. So that was another adventure. But eventually, what I forgot to mention was I had actually met my husband-to-be in Alice Springs, and he was very patient. So I went and did my thing overseas and came back after getting married to him at the end of 2 years. He was a very patient man. That's why we're still together. So I came back to Alice Springs and did another 7 years there, which is a testament to how much I love the place. But I was getting itchy feet. I wanted to do something else. I really wanted to move forward in my career, and that wasn't going to happen in Alice Springs. So I got a job in Cairns, leading the newsroom there. Cyclone Yazi happened soon after, and to my surprise, there were even more horrific murders than I had ever had to cover in Alice Springs. Now that was quite shocking to me. From a body being dissolved in acid, a couple killed over a car, a mother and daughter being murdered by a jealous ex, and a woman stabbing her 7 children and niece right before Christmas. The last event really rocked me, and it was then compounded about 6 months later by the Ravenshoe Cafe explosion, which I'm sure is all very fresh in your memories. I was actually next door at the Crystal Cascades filming a story about the meteorite having been stolen, and I know that someone's finally been charged and sentenced over that now. I was just about to leave and I got the phone call from Brisbane, something's happened at Ravenshoe, can you go straight there? So I was actually the first camerawoman on scene, and I arrived to utter chaos. The main street was just full of ambulances and white sheets and people just trying desperately to help. And that was my natural instinct as well, but I had to ignore that. I was there to do a job. So I felt very, very conflicted. It was the hardest day of my career. So I set to work answering both phones, constantly doing live crosses, filming the scene, trying not to get in anyone's way, doing interviews, pouring rain, freezing cold. I wrapped up about 8 o'clock after doing a live cross and a television package, and they made me drive home. I was on my own in a 4-wheel drive, and I wanted to stay the night knowing that they'd want me to do the story the next day, but they said, no, hop in the car, come home. And I was so overwhelmed by then, so exhausted that I didn't even turn the headlights on until I was halfway home. Didn't realise, I was just that exhausted. But anyway, I got home safely, thankfully. So that was that episode, and it really knocked me around. So the child murders and that event particularly eventually caught up with me. I started to see a counsellor because my personality and my outlook started to change. And I have to acknowledge that person who I saw first is in the room, so I'd really like to thank her for her enormous support and helping me where I am today. I decided to walk a section of the Camino in Spain, trying to get out of my own head. I thought I should get away from the daily exposure to trauma, and an opportunity came up to be the Chief of Staff of the ABC Bureau in far north Queensland. But being responsible for 12 staff, having a new role created, having editorial control for the whole Bureau, stakeholder engagement, disaster management, and producing the breakfast and morning shows proved too much. It was catastrophic. So I was just on 24/7 and I didn't sleep for 5 months. I became very depressed and I started having panic attacks. I didn't know what was happening and I was so frightened. I remember crying a lot, and I don't cry a lot, and I told my husband I didn't want to be here anymore. I'd reported on mental health and suicides for many years and had often thought of it as a selfish act, something I didn't understand. But at that moment, I understood. I had lost all joy, all my passion, and there was just an emptiness nothing could fill. My mum commented on a photo that I posted around that time, and she just said, "Look, all the light has gone from your eyes," and that was really shocking to me. I felt dead inside, and it was a very lonely and a very scary place. I went from being a social butterfly, like I am again today, to not wanting to leave the house. I thought my beloved journalism career was finished. And the only job I'd be able to do was putting those little stickers on fruit. I thought, I can do that. If I have to go back to work, I can do that. So I took 6 months off and I focused on my health. My only job each week then was deboning squid and vacuuming up turtle turds at the Turtle Rehabilitation Centre. After a few months, I decided to go and volunteer at a village of Nepalese Australian Somtamang, who founded the Friends of Himalayan Children charity in Cairns, which supports children in Batassi to go to school, and particularly girls who are vulnerable to being trafficked. I had emceed the charity's International Women's Day fundraiser, and my family had started sponsoring a girl in the village, so I decided I'd go and see Janisha and offer my time for a month volunteering in Batassi after the earthquake. I went by myself, hoping that by helping others that I would somehow find joy and value in my life again. It was a bit scary. The internet went down for 11 days. Yes, they do have the internet. They don't have much, and it's a very rudimentary existence, but they do have the internet. And it went off for 11 days, so everyone thought I was dead. But it was a really good experience. I helped with the rice harvest and taught in tin sheds, because at that stage they hadn't rebuilt the school. And it worked. I realised passing on my journalism skills to others was what I wanted to do. I had already mentored many ABC journalists who have now gone on to be high-profile correspondents, and I thought that was my way forward. So I proposed to the ABC that I come back in a mentorship role supporting the regional journalists in Queensland, but unfortunately they didn't go for it. So what did? They put me back in the newsroom. That made me sick. They didn't give me any other option. So my first day back, I remember it was 5 a.m. I got put on the early shift after not having been in the newsroom for a year. There was a murder to cover, Premier's visit, which I had to film for television, and I also had to use that as a training exercise on videography for our newest journalists, and there was one person off. So yeah, nothing had changed. So I thought, I have to do something to help myself. And I'd already had that idea of journalism training or media training, so I thought, why don't I set up my own business? And I did, regional media training in 2017. I wanted to tell good news stories because everyone's sick of hearing the bad news stories, and I was certainly sick of telling them. So I wanted to set this company up to create a better connection between the media and organisations, so help journalists get what they need from people, but also help organisations get their good news stories out there. So I found myself setting up a business, something I hadn't done before, thought about before, so I Found myself setting up a website, registering a business name, doing all the things that you do when you set up a business. I had really good mentorship from Tara DeVersi from YEP, and she gave me my first gig doing a media training session. So it all just went on from there. I held on at the ABC until I had a golden opportunity to join the Cairns and Hinterland Hospital and Health Service, who wanted someone to help them unearth their good news stories, which was the perfect job for me to get back to myself. And I remember the huge relief I had sending my resignation to the ABC from a beach in Greece, including a photo. I'd finally made the incredibly hard decision to let go of everything I'd worked for my whole life, because it was no longer serving me. I was open with my new boss about what I'd been through and the fact that I had a business, and in this new supportive work environment I was able to thrive and regain my confidence, which had really taken a beating. It was around this time that I was diagnosed with PTSD, so it all started to make a little bit more sense. So I was finally able to start getting the treatment that I really needed to get my life back fully. I'm now able to watch the news again without being triggered. Although I still limit my consumption because I try and balance my life with all the good that is around. So, little by little, I could feel myself coming back. The light was once again coursing through my veins, and I could see possibilities and opportunities. So in 2019, I decided to set up a second business, joining forces with Susie Cray, who I'd worked with at the ABC, and who'd also helped me through my hardest hours. She had almost 30 years of camera work and video editing experience and training, and similarly I had on the journalism and videography side. So we decided to pool our resources and set up a motion video training and production, and we now teach people how to do it for themselves. So we have our next Tablelands workshop on the 29th of May in Atherton, and we also do videography commissions for people. In July last year, I was finally brave enough to leave the workforce for good. I love my job at Queensland Health, but it was time to get out on my own. So since July, I have been self-employed in my two businesses, and I'm also writing the biography of Som Tamang, who I mentioned was the head of the Friends of Himalayan Children. He continues to make a big difference in the lives of women and girls in Nepal by ensuring that they can go to school. And he's been a pioneer also in getting women involved in the trekking industry in the Himalayas. So I'm madly writing that book at the moment, and hopefully it'll be out later this year, and it'll also include some of the stories of the women that he's helped. So I was thrilled that I could meet some of the women again who I had taught in 2016 when I went back in 2018 to do a fundraising trek to Everest Base Camp to raise money for the library. And here I was walking to Everest Base Camp, and some of the ladies who were in my class a couple of years before were now being employed as trekking guides. So that was a huge thrill, and I just knew how groundbreaking that was for Nepal. They've still got a long way to go. And Women in Media Far North Queensland still sponsors Santali Tamang, who said when I was first over there that she wanted to be a journalist, and she's pursuing that career. So hopefully we got one journalist out of that community. So if you'd asked me 5 years ago where I would be now, there's no way I could have imagined being this happy, this fulfilled, and this successful. Interestingly, I had a tarot card reading back in 2016 when everything was starting to go pear-shaped. It was from a woman who was also a mental health nurse, so I figured, can't hurt. I was clutching at straws by then, looking for answers to get me out of the awful place I was stuck in. The reading said being emotionally drained would push me towards making hard decisions, and once those were made, the doing would be easy on the job front. She was right. She saw lots of networking in my future, which is something that I hadn't had much time to do as a journalist. And here I am. I finally feel like I'm living my purpose, sharing my skills with others so they can be empowered and grow. I'm working really hard, but having the flexibility to take time off when I need to, have real conversations, make plans for the future, and hopefully help others to choose to challenge the situation they're in, whether it's a work situation, a relationship you're unhappy with, something you're putting off because you think you are not worthy, not qualified enough, or just afraid of what might happen. It could be the best thing you ever do for yourself. haven't actually had it on show, but as this tattoo I got almost 3 years ago symbolises, if you change nothing, nothing will change. It's my daily reminder. I discovered once I started sharing about what I was going through with my friends and family during my depression. Many of them actually came out of the woodwork and silently shared that they were dealing with similar battles. It somehow made it easier knowing that other people were going through the same thing and I wasn't alone. There is really great strength in community. And I feel very grateful to have been invited here to share my story. I invite you to connect with me. There will be a business cards in your pack, but I've also got some flyers that Jackie has if you want some more information about how I can help maybe. So if my presentation has raised any issues for you, please do talk to somebody. There's always someone to talk to. You don't have to suffer in silence. You can choose to challenge. Thank you.